Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Sri Guru Nanak Dev Khalsa College, I, Devika Marva, a student of BBE and a member of the Internal Complaint Committee of a college, extend a cordial welcome to our guest speaker, Ms. Preeta Jha, who is an eminent lawyer and a legal practitioner. I also welcome our Honorable Principal, Sir Dr. Gurmohinder Singh. A respectful welcome to all the participants, especially my fellow students who have joined us this afternoon for the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has entered into a new millennium and mankind has registered unprecedented growth on all fronts. Yet, from the dawn of civilization till date, the primitive mindset of a section of society with respect to gender equality has never failed to manifest itself in some form or the other. Sexual harassment of women at workplace has been widely observed and reported not just in India but around the globe. Sexual harassment is a mirror reflecting male power over women that sustains patriarchal relations, and these patriarchal values and attitudes pose the greatest challenge in resolution and prevention of sexual harassment. Women harassment at workplace involves serious health, human, economic, and social cost, which reflects in the overall development indices of a nation. With a view to check this evil of gender abuse, the legislature formulated POSH, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act in the year 2013. The aim of today's webinar is to disseminate information about rights, entitlements, and responsibilities enshrined under the regulation of the Act. I shall now introduce our guest speaker, Ms. Preeta Jha, to all of you. Ms. Preeta Jha is the President and Director of NGO Peace and Equality Cell. After obtaining an electrical and electronic engineering degree from University College London, she went on to become a solicitor and practiced as a family and a criminal solicitor in Manchester for many years. She also did outreach work and training on domestic violence legislation. In 2002, Ms. Preeta obtained an MA in Development Studies from University of Manchester. Since her return to India in 2005, she has been leading various justice projects working with survivors of mass violence, domestic violence, and survivors of child sexual abuse in Gujarat. A resource person at National Judicial Academy Bhopal on legislations relating to women and children, she has reached and provided trainings to activists in Gujarat, Muzaffarnagar, Assam, and Chhattisgarh. I now invite Ms. Preeta Jha to present her address. Ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your introduction. I'm very happy to be here to talk to you about this new act. As you already said, you have set out the context and background in terms of society and the problems that have existed for a long time. I just today am briefly, and I'm going to do a very basic session today because we have very little time. I really want to go a little bit into the background of the law, how it came about in our country, and the basics of what you need to understand, principally as students. This is not a detailed seminar for members of ICC. We may need to connect on that separately in terms of legal and technical information on that. Today, I just really want to give you the background and the basics of the law. So the background, many of you will know and would have heard of the Vishaka guidelines. How did that come about? So this story really actually is a very heartwarming story about how one person's courage can make such a difference. So Bhauri Devi is the woman who faced difficulties in Rajasthan. And she was a member of a group, she was a member of the government's program called Sathin. So they were basically activists who went about trying to stop child marriages, female ferticide, killing of female children, etc., in the rural areas of Rajasthan. She was a 36-year-old woman in 1992 when this incident happens, where she finds out that a 9-month-old child is about to be married. And as per her job, she goes and objects. She's from a lower caste community of the village, and the child marriage is taking place in the Gujjar community, which is a higher caste community in a Rajasthani village. This was not taken kindly by the upper caste community. She was ostracized, faced a social and economic boycott. Sadly, and I can tell you from my work in Gujarat, that this still happens. This is still a common experience for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes community in our country. If they don't obey the norms, or anybody, for women, of course, as well. If they don't obey the norms of society, then they can face ostracization and social and economic boycotts. So she was attacked. She has alleged that she was raped by 5 men for this act of trying to prevent, interfere in the local affair of the Gujar community and prevent the marriage. So she alleged that she was raped. A criminal case was attempted to be filed. As if any of you have attempted to file a case with the police station, and things are a bit better on sexual offences front, at least now. But in 1992, if you try to do it, many of you would know the kind of obstacles you face. Am I audible and clear to everyone? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
You're
okay.
perfectly clear.
Okay.
Very nice.
Okay. The problems she faced were many. Police initially were not taking the case. Her medical evidence was delayed. She was sent from doctor to doctor. It should be taken within 24 hours, but hers was not taken till after 48 hours, which at that point, it basically becomes useless because the evidence is actually gone. Anyway, eventually it was, because of the support of the women's group, the case was registered. Trial ran. Judges were changed 5 times. And in 1995, there was an acquittal on many grounds, but including the ground that, uncle and nephew both can't be involved in the same rape. Uncle won't do it in front of the nephew. Somebody, of such a higher caste won't rape a lower caste woman, etc. Again, this was 1995, after 3 years that the verdict comes, and it has been appealed to Rajasthan High Court, where it still awaits adjudication. So that's the state of the criminal justice system, right? So a lot of women's groups got together, and also important in this was that her employers, the government of Gujarat, neither the government of Rajasthan, or the panchayat were willing to take responsibility for what happened to her. Because let's remember that this happened while she was doing her work. It was not a personal struggle that she, stood up for. She was just doing her job, which was to stop child marriages. A number of people then filed a PIL in the Supreme Court saying that there should be some kind of security for women working at their workplace, because the government and other people said, oh, this happened in the field, so it's not her workplace. So that's how we get the R versus Vishaka, R versus Vishaka, the Vishaka case PIL filed in the Supreme Court, and hence the guidelines which came in 1997. The law we have now is almost ditto of what was in the Vishaka guidelines, most of it. And the reason it needed to come, of course, is you're aware, Supreme Court judgments don't get implemented as well as they should be. Acts don't get implemented as well as they should be also. So this is how, in wake of the Delhi case, we get the Sexual Harassment Act along with the Anti-Rape Act in our statute book. It's a very nice piece of legislation, but much depends on how it's implemented. And that's where I would really like all institutions to look at, not just the letter of the law and putting the policies in place, but also the spirit of the law and trying to actually make. And what is the spirit of the law? It's trying to say, let's make our workplaces places where women can thrive just as much as men. Let it be gender equal, right? And that, whatever you believe in, to me, it makes eminent sense. When I do trainings for companies, I say to them, God didn't distribute talent according to your sex. There are randomly likely to be 50% talented women and 50% men in terms of whatever they're pursuing. So if your workplace doesn't offer the opportunity to thrive for women, if it doesn't offer them the same opportunity, or if it provides obstacles for women to do their best, they're losing out. Sure, their families are losing out, but society and nation are also losing out because you're losing so much of your talent when you don't have a workplace where women can pursue their dreams and passion just as men can. So that's why it's so very important. So getting back to the law, it was notified on 8th of December 22nd of April 2013, and the rules came in on 8th of December 2013. If you look at the wording of the Act, and I would encourage you all, and I always encourage everybody when we have any legislation, and I do trainings on various legislations, to spend some time, as you're lucky enough and privileged enough to read English, to just read through the Act. It's very easily available on Google. Just the wording of the Act is sexual harassment of women at workplace, prevention, prohibition, and redressal. So it's not just about redressal. It's not just about when it has happened and what do we do about it. You know, how do you complain, etc., which I will be dealing with today. But one of the primary aims of the legislation is to prevent this from happening. So that's something that requires institutions to look at their workplace, involve the ICC, involve the students and other people to see what are the things that your institution, what happens in your institutions. Are there dark spots where women are scared to go? You know, it will be different for each institution, but that's a discussion that you need to have with yourselves and with your students to work out what are the places where women don't feel safe. What are the things that are happening in your institutions that are preventing women from exercising their right to pursue their studies, you know, equally. So that's something that, you know, one of the workshops that one should try to do with the students to work out what is there that's stopping them and to prevent this from happening. Once it happens, of course, this is what we'll talk about. Most of what we're going to talk about today deals with what you should do once it happens. And really, the thing that I am going to talk about today is the basics of you understanding the making of a complaint. So there are 4 questions, really essentially, that I'm going to cover. And if you understand this as ICC members and as students, I don't think there's much more that you need to understand. What is sexual harassment, obviously, is very important for us to understand in terms of the law. We need to understand that everything that might happen to us that we don't like by a teacher or another student or anyone is not necessarily sexual harassment, right? So we need to understand what sexual harassment is. We also need to understand who can complain. Can anybody complain if they suffer sexual harassment? And who can they complain against? Can you complain against anyone? Also, what is a workplace? Also, there's a time frame that you need to complain in. And how do you complain? These are the 4 questions that I will essentially answer. If we have more time, I might look into the role and functions of internal committees, role of employer, understanding the process of complaints and inquiry. But these 3 are really a seminar in itself. For the ICC committee, I usually do those in detail for the ICC committee itself. So let's go back to the issue of what is sexual harassment. I define 3 things as being very core to this idea of sexual harassment in the law. It's some act, verbal, non-verbal, whistling, touching, visual, can be a number of acts, but it has to be something that has something sexual in it. It can't be anything. If I have a fight with you and I slap you, that's not sexual. Yeah, it may be against the rules of the university. And there has been a case, if you're aware of workplace ideas, you know that often there happens to be politics and you get different groups wanting the institution to go in different directions. So there was one such scenario in a case where one group was having, you know, they were at loggerheads with each other. So one person, there was a piece of paper that was very important. And let's say, I'm just going to make up a name. Ram walked out with a piece of paper. Lakshmi went after Ram and tried to take the paper out of him. And there was a kind of a, it was the other way around. Lakshmi went out with the paper and Ram deliberately, forcibly took the paper out of his hand. She claimed that this was sexual harassment. The institution didn't agree. She went to appeal. It eventually actually reached the Lehigh Court. And the court said no. Definitely it was an assault because she didn't want him to touch her. Yeah, anybody touching somebody else without their consent is an assault. But it wasn't a sexual assault. And we really need to understand this because there have been cases. I once heard of a case in which somebody said, I've been sexually harassed. And the complaint was, he has asked me to go and buy cigarettes. And what can be sexual about going to buy cigarettes? Certainly, there was a perceived abuse of power in that situation, that somebody was asking her to do something which she felt was putting her down. So I want to make this point very important. Yes, our constitution says we should have equality and there should be no gender discrimination, but every piece of gender discrimination is not sexual harassment. Please hear me very clearly on that. Sexual harassment has to have something sexual in it. Okay? Please really understand that. Okay? Anybody making you feel bad about yourself or bullying you or intimidating you or interfering with you in a way that you don't like. It may be other things. It may be violation of the service rules. It may be the violation of the code of honor of your institution. It may be a number of things. But as far as this act is concerned, it is not harassment unless it is something sexual. Okay? That I will repeat again and again because I feel this is a point that people are not understanding. And a lot of the complaints that are coming out are to do with discrimination rather than sexual harassment. There's a fine line, but there is definitely a line. And we need to observe that line. If you're not getting promotion and you should be, then you need to follow your labor rules. You can even go to court that it's you're not being treated with equality as per the constitution. But you can't use this law, which is about sexual harassment. Okay, so that's number one, part of the sexual harassment. Number two is that it has to be unwelcome. That's very important, right? Because if it wasn't that, then we'd never be able to produce children or have relationships or anything. Any sexual contact would be sexual harassment. That's the key thing, right? That is the key thing. It has to be unwelcome, right? I'll talk more about that because that's very important, because that's the other sticking point where a lot of things fall down, or people are not clear how to read that bit. And of course, third thing is that it has to be a workplace. The workplace has been defined so widely in the Act that almost every workplace, I can't think of a workplace. Instead of me, I think about 36 things are listed. I think it's easier for me to say that you tell me some place and it's a workplace. But more than that, workplace is not just the physical place where you're working. It's not just Guru Nanak Khalsa College. It's also where Guru Nanak Khalsa's teachers or students go for a trip as part of their work. If it's a national trip, international trip, interstate trip, or if they're meeting anywhere else to do with work, then it is workplace. So, for example, in Bamri Devi's case, the fact that she was in a field, it doesn't matter because that's her work. She goes and works on changing things on the ground. So activists and other people who are working on the ground, workplace includes that. Right? So that's very important to understand. Then I want to go back to the notion of unwelcome. Unwelcome to whom? There are a lot of misunderstandings on this point. Unwelcome to the woman? Yes, the law decides and describes it as a subjective experience of the woman. You can't argue that I didn't think anything of it. And this is where there is a lot of debate and a lot of gray areas that are difficult, because necessarily there's an interaction. And the law is, by the way, at the moment gender specific. It's only men who can sexually harass women. There are many institutions who have a gender neutral policy that you can have, but the law recognizes sexual harassment as men against women. And if you have questions around that, I can talk, but primarily, I think sexual harassment is a function, as has already been indicated by our first speaker, about power. And in our country, still very small percentage of women are in formal employment, And of that, a very small percentage of women are in positions of power. In USA, it is gender neutral, because I think there are more women in positions of power over men. But at the moment, and when that increases, I would have no objection to it including men. But at the moment, I don't think there's a huge problem with that being gender specific. So it's about the subjective experience of this woman. So that really, this is what I mean, is that it's not just knowing about the app, because this is a whole area in which we are really behind, because we don't talk to our children, we don't talk to students about relationships, about consent. Unwelcome, yeah, you shouldn't have consent, but not many of us have asked, what is consent and what is not consent. It's not always black and white when two people come from very different backgrounds with very different expectations. To give you an example, for some man, it might be that a woman talking to him late on social media means that she's consenting. And as for a woman, it would be like, that's just WhatsApp, right? So it's very important to understand these things, and for men, or whoever is initiating the sexual act, to clarify and ask, and to ensure that there is consent. And I know I've done some trainings, and men say, well, you don't kind of say, oh, are you going to have sex with me? That's not how it happens in real life. I understand that, but there are ways for you to ensure that the woman's consent is there. Our whole culture, in a way, doesn't encourage that clarity, and often it's also thought that if a woman says no, it doesn't mean you give up. We've got songs like Nana Karte Pyar Tumhi Se Kar Baithe. So it's taken almost that it perhaps only you lose women who'd say yes immediately. They have to be pursued. And when women say no, maybe they mean yes. In fact, that is part of sadly, of a Supreme Court judgment where that has been said also, that sometimes when women say no, maybe there's a little bit of yes there. So that's the whole patriarchal thing that, really has to be challenged, but recognize that it's not always black and white. And as far as the women are concerned, and the person who's being, let's say, pursued, or in terms of this, I think it's very important for you to express the unwelcome part of it. I know, again, that's a power thing. And in our society, if it's somebody who's your employer or in position of power to you, it's not so easy for you to say no. But I think there are different ways in which we can express no. Of course, one is to say it verbally, that you don't want to receive the calls, you don't want to receive the emails. Equally, if you don't respond to the calls or the emails, it's also implied that you're not interested. But I would encourage women to take that step and say no in those situations, so that, that unwelcome part is clear. The other thing, often with consent and relationships, the other one bit is consent, and what leads to sexual offenses and sexual harassment is when men experience rejection and a no, So that's another thing that we need to talk about. We've all had to deal with rejection in our lives, but we don't often talk about it and think you're lucky if you have not. It doesn't feel nice to be rejected. Response to rejection can be anger, pain, denial, and then at times acceptance. So, we can have a conversation also about, can we not think about how we reject? Is it not better to kind of, remove somebody suddenly from your life? Can it be done more gently, depending on the person? Because these things are very complex, right? It's very hard for me to come here and sort of tell you, do it X, Y, Z way, because each person is different in how they take rejection. But if you're in a relationship with somebody, you probably know better how to deal with that person, what would really hurt that person, and how you can do it so it doesn't hurt so much, without it being unclear that you don't want to be in the relationship, right? Because there are people who are driven to suicide if they're rejected. There are people who carry out acid attacks and knifings and murder in response to rejection. So for women, of course, I would also always say, be aware and be concerned for your safety when you take that big decision. A lot of evidence to show that's really a vulnerable point for women when they decide to end a relationship. That's the point at which violence is likely to be most, when the violence comes, is when somebody realizes that, the person is leaving, they're no longer within their control. Yeah. I will now go back and just read you out the definition of sexual harassment, Section 3.2 of the Act. Please do take your time to read it afterwards. It says this: the following circumstances, among other circumstances, if it occurs or is present in relation to or connected with any act or behavior of sexual harassment, may amount to harassment. Very sort of long-winded language, but the important part is that something forgotten. What comes after is only sexual harassment if there is a behavior of sexual harassment. So then it talks about implied or explicit promise of preferential treatment in employment, implied or explicit promise of detrimental treatment in her employment, implied or explicit threat about her present or future employment status, interference with her work, or creating an intimidating or offensive or hostile work environment, humiliating treatment likely to affect her health and safety. Now, all of these might be breach of some other rules without the sexual harassment. But just because, you know, your employer shouts at you, it's not sexual harassment, unless there is some sexual harassment and this is coming after because you did not comply with the sexual desire or whatever. So that's a very important point to understand. Some examples of sexual harassment would include touching when you don't want it, requests for sexual favors, any other kind of visual, verbal, or physical conduct. Sexually colored remarks is talked about in the legislation, and showing pornography. That one worries me, sexually colored remarks, because it's very subjective and culturally specific. And on the campus of university, it may not be a big deal, and maybe women wouldn't mind if somebody calls them sexy or hot in a particular context, but in another context, that would be seen as a sexually colored remark. So that is slightly problematic. Can you keep telling me how much time I've got left, please? Hello?
Ma'am, you have another half an hour to go.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've talked about what is sexual harassment. Some questions that, you know, if you do workshops, I think I would like you to think about. If you don't have, I usually do a little workshop with the group, in a group. It's nicer to do that, group of about 30 students or staff, whoever's there, and really kind of debate some of these questions on why do men sexually harass women? You know, is it true that only classically beautiful women are harassed? Is it true that women are harassed because of the provocative clothing that they wear? And some questions around what percentage of women do you think face harassment at work? What percentage report it? What is the impact of sexual harassment on the victim? And what is the impact of co-workers? In terms of sexual harassment, you know, when we discuss it, one of the things that should come out of the discussion is that it's a relationship of power, right? It's not about being attractive. You know, it happens to 60-year-old women and 6-year-old girls. So it really is a function of power. And it isn't only women who wear clothing. And of course, women have the right to wear whatever clothing they want. And we as a society need to think. And I do understand that when you come from different backgrounds, different clothings, but I think, you know, this is where our schools and institutions also come in, because there is no notion of culture that is fixed. We tend to think in fixed ways. What was Indian culture 60 years ago is not Indian culture now. And Indian culture is defined very locally at times. It's not a wholesome category, you know. Middle-class Indian culture in particular part of the country is very different from middle-class Indian culture in another part of the country. So I think we need to think about those things, but, you know, be mindful that women have rights over their autonomy, over their body, and, you know, there's no justifiable reason that if somebody wears something that we think, you know, we have consent to do X, Y, Z. The question about the percentage of women who reported, a very small percentage of women. The research done so far indicates a very small percentage of women report any sexual harassment. And the reason for that is, of course, that people, particularly in an employment context, fear the consequences, right? They think they won't be believed, they're a troublemaker, they won't get any jobs. So there's fear of victimization. in that. And the impact on anybody that it happens to, of course, is, it's not just a employment impact, it's also a mental health impact. You begin to question yourself. You think, what is it about you? Why you? Why is this happening to you? It's because you're not very good at your work, and is it because, it's a number of questions, that self-doubt that creeps into a woman when this kind of thing happens to her. The impact on the workplace, of course, is that, this doesn't encourage highly productive individuals. There's gossip, there's all kinds of things that happen when this kind of cases come out, or are happening, even if they don't come out. That's even worse. Impact on co-workers, because, I've given training in institutions where some people have thought, why am I getting this training? I'm not going to do this. It's not, you may not be somebody who's going to do sexual harassment, but you may be a witness. You may be part of the culture which creates sexual harassment. I was told that there was a school in England where a male teacher was looking out the window and, talking about the hot girls from the window, and the other teachers didn't say anything about it. So that is kind of the male teacher culture that you don't want to encourage. If you're a co-worker, you should say that's not okay, because it's like depicting, girls in a particular way. And that's not what's important about girls. The female teachers are not doing that with the boys. So it's a sexualization of girls that is a problematic thing that happens in our society, right? Okay, then next question. We've looked at what is sexual harassment. The next question that we want to look at is who can make a complaint. And here again, it's been defined very, very widely. The Act covers any woman, not necessarily just employees. So if I am a lawyer and a client comes in to see me and I harass her, she's not my employee, but she can make a complaint. Similarly, if there's a consultant or somebody visiting the institution, say I come to give a training at your institution, the driver who picks me up from the airport harasses me, that would be sexual harassment because I've come for work. And even though before I reach Khalsa College, if I'm harassed in the car, that would be sexual harassment, and even though I'm not an employee. So it covers all the sectors, as I said, workplaces, organized, unorganized sector, public sector, private sector, clients, customers, and domestic workers. And again, it's irrespective of their age or employment status. I had somebody argue with me about this because they said a woman necessarily means it's somebody over 18. It doesn't, because it's been defined very widely. So it does apply to schools also, even though for schools we've got the criminal separate criminal legislation, POCSO, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So this is what it says about who can complain. The Act defines it as an aggrieved woman. And it says this is Section 2A of the Act. Aggrieved woman means in relation to a workplace, a woman of any age, whether employed or not, who alleges to have been subjected to any act of sexual harassment by the respondent. In relation to a dwelling place or house, a woman of any age who is employed in such a dwelling place or house. So the whole employment status thing is being taken out of the power to make complaint. The reason being, with the Vishaka guidelines, many times the employers would say, oh, it's a term, we have on our record, this person is not an employee. We don't even know who she is. Or it's a temporary contract, etc., etc. So to take, throw the baby with the bathwater, the whole issue of employment status is taken out of the idea of making a complaint. So for example, in Khalsa College, students can make complaint even though they're not employees. And students, actually, I'm facing in the institutions where I am, there are more complaints student versus student than student versus teacher, also for obvious reasons, because it's more difficult to make a complaint against your teacher because, there's a power relationship there again. So the second question, or third question now, is against whom can you make a complaint? So again, this has been defined very cleverly in the legislation. Respondent, and this is Section 2M of the legislation. Anyone against whom an allegation of sexual harassment has been made by the aggrieved woman. So all you have to say is, allege, is that such and such person has made a complaint of, has sexually harassed me. Of course, what I went through about sexual harassment, what the core constituents are, have to be there for it to be a valid issue of sexual harassment. Again, you don't have to prove employment status of the respondent, because that would have been the other thing again. Now, that person was just on contract, is a temporary employee, etc., etc. It doesn't come into the picture. Next. So this is the main thing. Who can complain? What can you complain about? Obviously, sexual harassment. Who can you complain against? Now, I just want to look at a bit about how you can complain. And that has to be in writing. And if you can't write, in any place you want to make a complaint, the Internal Complaints Committee is supposed to support you to make a complaint in writing, okay? And that has to be, because one of the things that I really want everybody to appreciate is that ICC is like a judicial body. It's adjudicating on the complaint. And many times I feel ICC members are not aware of the big responsibility they've taken on. For many years, I used to refuse to be on a complaints body because I realized as a lawyer what a responsibility it is to judge. You have the power to judge, but your questions can also be questioned on whether if they're reasonable decisions, biased decisions, have you taken anything irrelevant into account? The law says it has, you have to exercise fairness and rules of natural justice apply. Now, at Law College, there are many lectures to explain to us what natural justice is. A lot of the people who have been, are on the ICC have never been told and don't know. And, it's one thing even to study it, but to embody that fairness and ideas about fairness as they exist in law is something that we do need to be trained on. I've come across, many eminent professors and in different fields, but they're not necessarily people who appreciate what are not their fault. Why would they appreciate that? There's a whole set of procedures you have to follow if somebody makes a complaint. You have to show at every stage that you have been fair to the respondent, which involves giving him a copy of the complaint, hearing him, all the things. These are very well set out in the rules, but you have to do it. And really, overall, it's the spirit of this that you have to be fair. You can't pre-decide something. If you have some reason to pre-decide, you shouldn't be on that ICC committee. It has to be a fair decision. You can't decide before the complaint process starts that it has happened, right? Similarly, as you have to be both ways, you can't decide it hasn't happened because the student or the teacher, X has done something before and Y has done something before. Those things can't enter the consideration when you're deciding a particular complaint. You have to judge it on the facts of that case. Yeah. Now, going by the process and sort of a little bit about the process and procedure, there are three ways. Let's imagine that a woman makes a complaint. Teacher or student has suffered sexual harassment. I think there are three outcomes that can follow. One outcome is that you straight away, as soon as something happens, you confront the person who's done it and say, look, I'm not okay with this, please stop this, or I'll take the next step. The person genuinely didn't realize that he was sexually harassing you or doing something that was unwelcome, and the behavior stops, right? That can happen, right? And I would encourage people to do that because there are, nothing wrong with saying, stop this right now. And if it stops, nobody has to go through a formal process of making a complaint, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not always possible because it's the power equation we may be in. But where there are equal relationships, I don't see anything wrong with women, girls, teachers, talking to somebody in an equal position power and just saying, this is not what I want, just stop. Right? The second thing is that you make a complaint to the committee, to the ICC committee, but you're very clear, all you want is an apology, or if he accepts what he has done is wrong, you're happy to leave it there on the basis that it doesn't happen again to you or somebody else. So this is a way in which many complaints are resolved. It should be recorded in writing and signed by everybody, if this does happen. I see a tendency in institutions to not let things enter on record, a tendency to think that if there are recorded complaints of sexual harassment in the institution, it will reflect badly on the institution. I find the institutions which record complaints and deal with them are much better than the ones who deny that any such thing is happening in their colleges. Or they get some counseling body to deal with it. Because once processes become clear, it sends a very clear signal to the students and to the teachers that there is a process in place and this happens. And it actually makes the place a safer place when you acknowledge the reality of what's happening rather than denying it, which I see many institutions doing, sadly. Third, of course, is that you talk to the woman and she says, no, by the way, that option that I just gave you about an agreement being signed, that can be only done if the woman is okay with that. It can be only at her request that the ICC can deal with a complaint by what's called reconciliation agreement, okay? If I, as a complainant, want to have a full hearing, that's my right. You can't, the ICC can't say, no, let's compromise this. And the other thing is that the terms of that agreement can only be some things like he doesn't do it again or he's transferred. It can't be that she receives X amount of money from him. It can't be a financial thing, right? And the other thing that we need to be very clear, any process of ICC, no lawyers can be involved. That's not to say they're not, because obviously lots of advice is given by lawyers to clients who come to them. So I remember having a case in which somebody just didn't want to write anything, and I think that was because he had been advised not to put anything in writing. So lawyers will be involved, but they can't be sort of physically and involved and come and make representations in front of the ICC, etc. So we now have a little idea of what it is. One of the questions that I'm often asked when I'm doing this training is, what if we get a false complaint? Whenever it comes to women and children, there's a lot of worry about false complaints. That's there for 498 cases and domestic violence cases, rape cases, everything. And my response, and I've written about the 498 thing on Open Democracy, if any of you want to see. You see, in our country, as far as the criminal justice system is concerned, there are false cases in every crime, right? Largely due to corruption. If you did some research, you'd find that at least about 7% cases are false. That would be true here also. I would never claim that there are no false cases. Of course there are false cases. We live in a context where people can be bribed, and for a job or something else, people will make false complaints to get somewhere. But there is no research or evidence, and I would encourage people to do such research to suggest that there is an overwhelming majority, number of complaints of any kind in these legislations which are false. So I would really ask, and as far as the internal complaints committee members are concerned, you really shouldn't be asking that question. How will you know? You have to start with an open mind. You cannot know it's false or not false till you have heard the evidence, right? So you need to hear the evidence. The inquiry process is a bit like a trial in court. If you haven't done it, you do need somebody with some legal expertise to advise you on that process. You have to have written complaint within a time frame that has to be given to the respondent. He has to respond within a time frame. You have to get the name of the witnesses from both sides. You have to allow the witnesses to give their evidence, and you have 90 days to make your decision to go through this process, right? Main thing, all of these things are written down in law, so it's not that I need to go through all the details with you. The main thing that I think I would like to emphasize repeatedly, if you do get a case that has to be tried, is to remember that you have to be fair and you have to be seen to be fair, right? So it's not okay to say anything. And sometimes I think there are times when people, because and this is what happens when it's your employment place, people, you really have to try to imagine that you don't know them and not be prejudiced or biased by that, or not appear to be that. So, it cannot be that when you talk to the woman, you say, oh dear, yes, yes, I'm so sorry this happened to you, because that's showing that you believe her already without hearing it. And if you're really harsh towards the boy who has made the complaint, sorry, against whom the complaint is there, or the teacher or whatever, we have to be empathetic, obviously, because this is something that's horrible. But I always suggest that we should have a two-tier process, because the first time when somebody makes a complaint, there should be somebody else who empathizes or screens whether this is a sexual harassment complaint or not, compared to the person who sits on the IC committee and hears the complaint. Because it's very hard for you to be fair when you've seen a woman come to you, cry, and tell you whole process, and then you're sitting on the IC committee and you have not had this, gone through the same process with the boy or whoever it is that has made the, against whom the complaint is made. So I would say that have a process in which somebody who supports, and you have a duty to support somebody who has made a complaint, is not on the ICC committee. And that's not to be saying that, you have to follow the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And it's not that difficult, because there are usually not a lot of witnesses and not a lot of complicated things that you have to get through. But you do have to remember in mind that this is a judicial hearing. You're judges. ICC members are judges. You're not there for X, Y, and Z. You're not there. You may be there as a student representative, or as a representative of whatever department. But when it comes to this judgment, you're only looking at these things. Was it unwelcome? Was it sexual? Is it harassment? That's what you're looking at, not anything else. Yeah. Another thing that I need to cover, of course, is you may be aware that, as well as the civil law, which is what we have just dealt with, the sexual harassment law, there is also a criminal law post the Delhi rape case, where there were changes in the rape law, and we introduced a whole new section, 354 and ABCD, which is about sexual harassment, disrobing, stalking, voyeurism. So we also have criminal law. And the sexual harassment 354A is almost identical in wording to what we have in Vishaka guidelines. I think they also copy and pasted bits of the Vishaka guidelines. So very often when sexual harassment has taken place, both criminal offense can be alleged, as can a civil offense. The difference, of course, is in the amount of proof. In a civil thing, you have to be, it's on balance of probabilities. I have to believe you rather than her. In the criminal case, it has to be, the burden is much higher. The court has to be sure. So that's why, it's not that every time there's a sexual harassment complaint, a criminal case will succeed, because the burden of proof is much higher. But that is an option there also. For people to register a complaint, as I think they did in Delhi once, when the complaint was not being taken in the internal complaints or in institutional capacity. Complaints have to be made within 3 months. There's a very strong timeline for the complaint. It can be extended to 6 months at the discretion of the committee in very exceptional circumstances. So if I'm a PhD student and I want to make a complaint against my supervisor, I might not want to do it till my, dissertation is handed in and the whole process has been over. Number of things, I won't go into the details of a number of copies that have to be given. They're all very well set out in the rules and the act, what you have to do. The main thing that I'll repeat again and again is that it has to be a fair and impartial hearing and due process, both for the complainant and the respondent, and rules of natural justice apply. And no lawyer is allowed before the internal complaints committee, because it's taken that, A, it would add to costs, B, it would add to time, because we love arguing and arguing and arguing about everything, much more than sometimes we need to. Time frame within which you have to finish the complaint, the inquiry, and give the report to the employer, and with your recommendations. Big questions are about, does the employer have to follow the recommendations? We await judgments on that. Some people argue they have to follow the recommendations. If they don't, the complainant can do something about it. Other people would argue that it's the employer who has to, has the power and right to make that decision, so they don't have to follow exactly the recommendation that the authority makes. Otherwise, why is it given to them? Whatever. So that's an area that requires more thinking about at the moment. What we're finding is that there is sometimes a gap in the action that should happen after recommendations straight away. It's important that you send a message out in your institution that once the ICC has decided something, it should be followed. But of course, I think with it being a legal issue now, people are worried about court proceedings, etc. So of course, it's important also to have some external advice on what has happened to decide that. That, I think, is kind of it of what I want to tell you. I thought maybe we can look at some of the scenarios and sort of some examples and see whether what you think has happened. This is easier in a setting where people can respond, but let's try see what happens. So this is scenario 1. If we have time, how much time have we got? Hello?
We have around 10-15 minutes, ma'am.
Okay. And after that, we'll take questions?
Yes, ma'am. There are a few
Okay.
questions also.
Okay. So let's consider a scenario when somebody is at work visit outside their normal place. They're on an out-of-station visit, let's say, to Ahmedabad. And Julie, the woman, agrees to have dinner with her boss, let's call him Ram. And Ram touches her knees under the table. She screams and leaves the restaurant. And then she gets an abusive text from Ram saying, you swear word, how dare you humiliate me like this in front of so many people? You're fired, right? 2 questions. What should Julie do? What would you advise her? So the question 1 is, do you think sexual harassment has taken place here? If anybody would like to respond. And if yes, why you think it has? Anybody? Hazard a guess? Hello? Nobody wants to hazard a guess? Somebody's saying yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yeah,
of course it is. Of course,
Yeah.
it is an instance of sexual harassment because there was physical touch. He touched her knees. And then after that verbal abuse, I would also take that as sexual harassment because he's using his position of power to, intimidate her.
True, but that's the point I want to make. If there wasn't the sexual act, it would not be sexual harassment. It's because we would say that touching somebody's knee under the table is sexual harassment, as opposed to, you do a piece of work that I'm really unhappy with, and I throw the piece of paper and scream at you. Without the sexual part, it would be abuse, and you may have other remedies available, and it is abuse of power at times, but that is not sexual harassment. That's the point I want to make. Yeah.
Yes, got it, ma'am. But the first definitely is, sexual harassment, the touching of the knees.
Yeah, that's why. So that's what you. So if you're an
feel-
ICC member, you have to look at these things. You see, it's not about feelings. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Ma'am, my name is Nidhi, and I was just wondering, don't you think sexual harassment is just an extension of, other forms of harassment? I mean, often they cannot be demarcated so clearly.
Well, they have to be, because there is a lot of conduct. I can be yelling at you. I've been at court one day, and a prosecutor was behaving, which I thought, he was behaving in a way that I think was corrupt. He was trying to bully a client to agree to a deal which she didn't want to. And he was yelling. And when I talked to him, he said, I'm like that. And I talked to other advocates and said, yeah, he's like that. He yells all the time. So, but there was nothing sexual at all. And there could not be a complaint of sexual harassment. So there is a demarcation if I have not done anything sexual, and there are laws covering different kinds of thing, right? So, there is a law on domestic violence. There is intimidation, bullying, and etc., which I think, can be complained against. I don't know, in terms of, if employment law, I'm not an employment lawyer or a labor lawyer, so I can't say that much, but sexual harassment, just because we have a law, it can't capture everything that happens in life, right? Because I want to get rid of you because you're a very strong woman. That's gender discrimination. But if I have not harassed you sexually, you can't make a complaint of sexual harassment, and you should not make a complaint of sexual harassment, because that, is what brings the law into disrepute. Then, it'll be like, oh, it's a law that's being misused. That we already have, whether you do it or not. There's a lot of that goes around happening. Any other responses? Okay, so can I just do another scenario with you? So Ramila is a temporary consultant, and she is asked to have dinner with an evening with a junior colleague. And the day after and the day after, they end up having a relationship, a sexual relationship. Then Mohan, the junior colleague, meets another woman a year after and leaves Ramila. Ramila threatens to file a complaint against Mohan. She says she has saved all his texts and it will definitely prove her case. Can she? What would you advise her? And can you please put your mic on, somebody, if they want to respond? Was that clear, or shall I say it again? Yeah.
Ma'am, can you please repeat if it was consensual or just from Mohan's side?
No, it was. What I said was that she's asked to have dinner one evening by a junior colleague, and then the day after, and she goes. And after a few days, he invites her to his hotel room, and they start having a sexual relationship. And implication is that it's consensual. So, and after 1 year, 12 months, Mohan meets another woman, and he leaves Ramila. And this is the point at which Ramila says, and this happens when relationships end and you don't want them to end. There is a number of people who might want to make a complaint of sexual harassment. And she threatens to file a complaint against Mohan. She says that she has saved all his texts and it will definitely prove her case. Can she, and what would you advise her?
No, ma'am, she can't. She can't. Because it was consensual in a relationship. When things are consensual, you cannot file a complaint of sexual harassment. Like, even after divorces, people don't file a complaint of sexual harassment. It's not just acceptable. If had it been forced on her by some or the other way, it would have been justified. But just because a person, like, it's an individual choice if you want to continue a relationship or not. These factors do not matter when you want to end a relationship.
Totally. So I'll go back to what I said about the three things. It's that unwelcome part is not there because she chose to get into a relationship, right? So if it's not unwelcome, it cannot be sexual harassment because, of course, if you look at the research, a lot of us meet our partners at work now whilst we're working together. There would be none of that happening if every time a relationship goes bad, there's a complaint of sexual harassment. And every time there's a relationship, it's not true that there's sexual harassment in it. The other point in that was, of course, that I said it's after 12 months. You have time limited in the Sexual Harassment Act. It has to be within 3 months. So she's time barred anyway. Yeah. So that kind of is what I want to say for the time being. If there's any other questions or whatever you would like to take up, I'm happy to deal with those. Hello?
Yes, ma'am. There are certain questions.
Sure.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Paul Sawani, a final year student of BBE.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, I'll be taking the questions from everyone's side. So,
Okay.
ma'am, your talk has been very well received. That reflects in the deluge of questions in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
I shall try to take up as many as questions as possible given the time constraint.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay
So,
on longer if we need to answer the questions.
okay. So, ma'am, the first question is from Anjali Gaur. She asked, if a woman is blackmailed in the workplace via social networking sites, that is, like if someone's blackmailed to post unethical on social media, then which area of law will deal with it?
There's a law on blackmail. It's a criminal law on blackmail. So she needs to go and get some legal advice on that.
Okay. Another question from Devika. Uh, does the onus of proof of the wrongful act lies on the female or the institution as well?
No, no, it doesn't lie on the institution because institution is deciding. Institution has a duty to address the complaint. Institution has a duty to provide help to the ICC. So, for example, if I am an employee and I'm saying that the sexual harassment happened and it affected my mental health and I stopped going to work, or that I stopped, this boss started giving me bad review feedbacks after I refused to sleep with him. So you can ask for those kinds of data from the employer, right? Because they have it. They have a duty to help, to make sure that the hearing happens. But it's not their duty to prove. How can it be? It cannot be their duty to prove or disprove the case, right? But it's their duty to cooperate and provide all the information they're asked to provide. And it's their duty to make sure their ICC members are trained. It's their duty, the employer has a duty to make sure all of you know such a law exists, what it is, and to protect and make sure that it's a gender equal place. All of those are duties of employer, but it can't be duty that they have to prove sexual harassment. Because that's, first question is, has there been sexual harassment? And then proving it is the business of the person who's made the complaint, right? With the witnesses, etc. And as I said, it's balance of probabilities, so it's not a very high. It's 51-49 if we're going to look at percentages, which doesn't make much sense. But I have to say that it probably happened. I don't have to be sure that it happened, as we do in a criminal trial. Yeah.
Okay, noted. Next question from Gupta VK. If someone has taken your number without your consent from someone else and calls you at late night, what will it be called? Also, if the same person share your photos without your consent.
It's non-consensual behavior, right? But it's not. There's nothing sexual in it, right? The person may be interested in you, but they have not done anything. But if they've taken picture of you whilst you're having a bath, that is now a criminal offense of voyeurism, where you take a photograph of somebody when they're in a private place, when they would not, expect that somebody is taking a picture. We now have a Supreme Court judgment on privacy, but again, that would be a civil thing. We don't have a criminal law on privacy as such.
Okay. Next question
It
is
could possibly come within stealing data or theft. You can choose, you can steal somebody's thing. That thing can be number or, possibly can be that, but that's like a long shot, Yeah.
okay. And what if a male member is wrongly or falsely accused?
That's also, that's actually a good point that you made. The law is very clear on that. There's a penalty for somebody who deliberately makes a false complaint, right? By that I mean is that it's not a false complaint because you can't prove your case. Because as you must be aware, a lot of our cases, people are acquitted all over the place in courts. It's one thing that I can't prove my case because there's not sufficient evidence. It's another thing that I have, got X, Y, and Z, and there is evidence that I've got people to make false statements, to implicate me because I have another agenda. So if that is proved, then they would be chucked out. There should be, your ICC rules, your policy should say clearly what would happen if somebody makes a false complaint. They face the same kind of scenario as somebody who is found guilty of a complaint.
Okay. Another question from Anjali Gaur. What could be the case in which a woman has filed a case and the police asks some unethical questions? So what can one do against it?
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done on changing society. That's a long-term project. You can write to a superior officer, which is what I do. You can write, get the media involved, because police don't like that very much. And you can bring that to the attention of the court at the relevant time also. Basically, yeah, you have to make a complaint to the superior officer that they're asking you unethical questions. They should not be doing that. The law is very clear that they should be very sensitive to you when they should not be asking you questions about your past history or anything like that, because they're not relevant to the case.
Okay. Next question from Tanya Rajput. If a person from other country is harassing someone by showing pornography and the victim doesn't know who that person is and how he got her contact number, how to deal with it?
Okay, again, this is falling in the criminal law realm. If there
Okay.
is Information Technology Act and trafficking thing, you have to go to the police and they have to see if they can trace who that person is. And there are things that can be done. Just it's online pornography and online offences. There is actually a cell now because it's rising, and I can't remember. I think it's Section 66 of the Information Technology Act. But such offences exist where you do these things online. So you can commit these offences online. If you're storing material which is pornographic, all of that is covered. Yeah, and in terms of sexual harassment, you can, be doing it online. The problem, of course, would be jurisdiction. If they're in another country, there's a whole difficult procedure that somebody has to go to get them to come to your country to undergo a trial. But there are often agreements. It's a complicated area of international law, but there are agreements between countries where they can be prosecuted, etc. But there are options. It's not that there's nothing you can do. But yeah, it's more difficult, of course. One thing would be to, of course, block that person and all that stuff that you can do online.
Okay. Uh, Next question from Charu Kaur. Can a complaint about a fellow employee regarding any behavior that has taken place outside the workplace be made?
It depends on your school's policy, right? Some institutions have an ethical honor code, etc. It can't within the, if you two are in a personal relationship and something happens which is not to do anything to do with work, then not. But a lot of policies include domestic violence or any kind of abuse as part of the policy of the gender equality thing. So it can come within the gender equality policy that you're not doing something, for example, colleagues, two people, there being domestic violence. Again, institutions brought to their notice can do something about that. But it's not within the framework of sexual harassment, but as part of their policy of gender equality or non-tolerance of no tolerance of abuse or violence against women. I think it's very important where we call it. It depends on your school's policy and stuff.
Okay.
And often if you do make such a complaint, I don't think they can not deal with it. But there is, of course, you have the criminal law and civil law. There's a law. You have other forums where you can take those things.
Okay. Next question from Muskan. What if respondent is not accepting his unlawful act?
Respondents don't have to, right? They don't have to accept their unlawful act. Then you say to the ICC, and ICC decides whether it's unlawful or not, and the court decides if it's a criminal case. Not very often, otherwise we won't have a criminal justice system if everybody accepted what they were doing was criminal or wrong. That's a very common scenario, right? Where people won't accept what they're doing. And, part of the only way we can, target that mischief is, of course, to, bring out that change in ourselves, our families, our communities, our societies, where people realize that things which are illegal are illegal. And that's the problem, right? A lot of the sexual harassment is not considered illegal and unlawful by a number of people. They think it's okay to violate women in this way. So the law is the law. They might think whatever, but it's the law which will prevail.
Next question from Nidhi Verma. In a lot of cases, the complainant's reputation, her job, may be at stake. Legal action is also a huge weight on resources like time and money. Are there any organization which can assist a complainant if she chooses to take serious legal action?
First of all, as far as the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act is concerned, there's no legal cost involved, of course, right? Because it's the ICC, which is an institutional mechanism that the university or whatever you are, your workplace has to have. So there's no legal cost involved. You don't have to have a lawyer. In fact, lawyers are not allowed in this forum, as I said. If you're doing a criminal case, there's legal aid, availability of legal aid in many places, but of course the quality of that varies. And there are many NGOs in Gujarat. We're doing it, and other organizations are doing it. In Delhi, there are many NGOs working on justice, so there are people. But justice, sadly, it's not very easy to get funding to fight court cases. Because particularly something like domestic violence, because there's so many cases, very few lawyers are doing it pro bono, but there are organizations and there are individuals who are helping people pro bono on these things, or at very subsidized rates. So she needs to connect with the women's organizations in the city or place where she is and ask for details of such organizations.
Okay. Another question from Charu Kaur. Though we have achieved legal equality, social equality has still not been achieved. There's a long way to go. So is it safe to even file a complaint? Because it's like risking your job and career to file this complaint. Will the results be positive?
That's $1 million question. The thing is, you see, if Pamvi Deri had thought like that, we would not have the law that we have now. I wouldn't be talking to you today. So whatever it is, we have to work at all fronts. And yeah, it's not, even if you win, it's a huge battle and huge drain on your mental resources. It's your choice, and I'm very non-judgmental on this issue. While some of my feminist friends are not, they think that we have to fight. I think it's a woman's choice whether she chooses to fight or not. We have a duty to support every woman who chooses to make a complaint, and we fight in different ways. You might decide to bring up your child in a way so he doesn't harass women. There's a number of different things we can do. It's a process, right? The dreams and the constitution that we have, it's not there now. That's why we have laws and rules. It's the kind of society we want to live in, right? But it's very important that all of us, and as the point, very good, important point she's trying to make is that once you make the law or something, it doesn't mean that things change automatically. It's only when, people change, and that's why I feel that, the laws are there and women's organizations are doing a lot of good work. I really feel it's time for men to start giving much more attention to gender equality and fighting for it, because it's then that we will, be in a better position. It's not just the responsibility of women to fight for gender equality and gender justice.
Correct, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering all the queries meticulously. And now I would request my fellow student and friend Abhay Mehra to propose the vote of thanks.
Greetings, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah. Hi.
Okay. Hello, all the ladies and gentlemen present. So I am Abhay Singh Mehra, student member of the Internal Complaint Committee of the college. I take this proud privilege to propose a vote of thanks. So first and foremost, I would like to thank, of course, you, our speaker for today, Ms. Prita Jha, for not just a very thoughtful, informative seminar, but also a lucid and compact overview of this act. Apart from that, all the queries and questions which were raised by the students were also answered with a lot of patience and detailed explanations. Speaking of which, I also take this opportunity to express my gratitude to all the participants who joined us for this session. Our principal, Dr. Gurmohinder Singh, deserves to be thanked for all his support and guidance. A big thanks to all the members of the Internal Complaint Committee and the Internal Quality Assurance Cell for taking this brilliant initiative. Now, before we formally conclude this webinar, I would request all the participants to kindly fill up the attendance form, the link for which has been provided in the chat box. E-certificates shall be signed and mailed to all of you shortly, to all of you who fill up this form. So thank you all once again for being a part of this wonderful webinar. It was indeed a very helpful and informative one.
Thank you very much. And I always appreciate questions. It means people are listening.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, participants, you all may click the cancel button and leave the meeting.
Ma'am, can I just ask you a question? Actually, I
Sure.
couldn't try it and the meeting got over. Ma'am, you're a feminist, right?
Yeah.
So, ma'am, I just wanted to know your stance on the contemporary feminism that we have been following lately. Ma'am, what I believe is that somewhere or the other it has failed us in the contemporary scenario. Like we have come a long way, we have achieved legal equality, but talking about scenario in today's day, feminism has been about elite women and that sect of the society, and it's not for everyone. So, I just wanted to know your stance on that.
You see,
Ma'am, my name is Charu.
Hi, Sharu. You know, there is not one feminism. I think there are many feminisms, and this is, and not the first time that we're thinking about these things, because there has been a big debate from black feminists against white feminists. As I said, the power that I talked about frames everything, right? And all women are not the same, as you're saying, as you know, and as we know in society. Caste women, rich women, educated women versus women rural women versus urban women. So there are many differences within women, and most feminist movements recognize that there are different kinds of women. And it's important for women from all sectors of society to be involved in the feminist movement. And of course, if it's mainly women of a certain class and caste who are involved, then it would be their concerns. That's why it's important for us to work in the rural context, in the urban context, in the cities. And you're right, there are some things. I remember doing a training on the anti-rape law, which you should have that training on as ICC members, or generally you should know that law. One of the very important things in that law which has changed is the definition of consent. And now it's an affirmative standard. Before it was like, I'm not sure, I thought she said yes. Now it's like you have to show why you thought she said yes. It has to be that you have to believe she said yes. And if a woman is not saying yes, then it's rape. And in many trials, it would be the woman as word which would be taken. If she has clearly said no, then that's enough. And I remember doing these trainings with rural activists, and somebody just looked at me like, oh, this is so irrelevant. And it was like, oh, if I believe what you're saying, then I get raped every night because I don't have a choice. That's not how I or my husband or anybody has been brought up to believe that, and this question was actually also asked in Parliament. Do you mean we have to ask our wives? And that's the reason why marital rape is still not on the law, because the idea that men have to ask their wives every day for consent is rather strange to some. So I don't think the movement is completely, elitist. I think it's about how we ensure that people from different sections of society are involved and their concerns are taken on board in our society. And it's a spectrum, right? Because a lot of the time, if we're talking about sexual abuse or trafficking, if the main question occupying you is an economic one, and if you're a low caste woman who's getting raped by a high caste woman, a man, it's, a lot of people don't understand why atrocity rape is different from rape, because it happens a lot. That's, these are the social realities that frame why something is what it is. So I believe that any movement, it should be, there should be not be, I think it's important in any movement for us not to have closed doors and not to have a few people who exercise all the power, and those things need to be localized more. But I think, we are where we are. It's been a long struggle, and there's nothing to stop other people from joining and trying to change things, like there was with the Me Too movement also, you know.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Preeta ma'am, thank you so much. It was really thought provoking. And the way you have set the stream rolling, it has, set the state for so many other queries. The technical aspects of the act, how is it workable, how to spread the word about it. So we look forward to at least one more session with you on other aspects of the act, ma'am. I
Sure.
hope you will definitely join us in the near future about this thing.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. And I am
Thank you
glad
so
that so
much.
many people joined. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay.
much. It
You're,
was really thought provoking and enlightening. Thanks, ma'am. We look
thank you.
forward to hear you again. Okay. Thank you. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye. How do you get out? Let's go. Check.
Can we leave now, Sukhvinder?